The first laugh came from across the street, sharp and careless, like a pebble thrown at a window. Nida heard it even over the noise of the old electric drill. She paused, wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her glove, and looked up at the half-built frame in her yard. 2 wooden posts stood like thin arms reaching up. A few uneven boards were connected between them. To most people, it looked like nothing. A messy start. A mistake. To Nida, it looked like the beginning of a promise. She lowered the drill and took a slow breath. Her hands were tired. Her back ached. But she didn't step away. Across the street, 3 neighbors stood near a parked car. One of them, a man named Imran, leaned on the hood like he had all the time in the world. He tilted his head and smiled like he was watching a comedy show. "Building a palace, Nida," he called out. The other 2 laughed. Nida did not reply. She turned back to her work, kneeling in the dirt and measuring a board again. She did it carefully. She had learned that if she rushed, she would pay for it later. The laughter didn't stop. It never really did. For the past 2 weeks, people had been watching her like she was entertainment. Every day after work, she came home, changed into old clothes, and stepped into her yard with tools she borrowed or bought slowly over time. Every weekend, she worked longer. People walked by, pretending they weren't looking, then whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Some of them weren't even trying to hide it. "She doesn't know what she's doing," an older woman had said one morning, loud enough for Nida to hear through her open window. "It's going to fall," someone replied. Nida heard every word. She just didn't answer them. Because if she answered, she might stop. And she could not stop. Not now. Not after she had already spent her last savings. Not after she had already promised herself, on the worst night of her life, that she would make something real out of the emptiness she carried. That night came back to her sometimes when she worked. It came like a shadow that didn't need light to exist. It was the night she came home to silence. A silence so deep it felt like it had weight. She remembered calling out, "Ami." No answer. She remembered running from room to room, her heart beating like it wanted to escape her body. And then she remembered the closed bedroom door, the still air, and the sick feeling in her stomach before she even opened it. After that, her life became a long list of things she had to handle alone. Paperwork. Bills. A job that barely covered rent. A grief that nobody could see but her. And worst of all, the feeling that the neighborhood had moved on, while she was stuck in the same moment. The day after the funeral, neighbors had brought food and kind words. Then, slowly, their kindness faded into curiosity. And their curiosity turned into judgment. "Poor girl," they said. "She's alone now," they said. "She'll probably sell the house," they said. But Nida did not sell the house. The house was small, old, and sometimes the pipes made strange sounds at night. But it was hers. It had been her mother's. It was the only place that still carried a piece of warmth. And now Nida wanted to build something beside it. Something the neighborhood couldn't ignore. Something that would change how people lived, not just how they talked. The drill whined again as she tightened another screw. The board held. Not perfectly, but it held. She stood up and stepped back to look at the frame. It wasn't pretty. Not yet. But she could already see it in her mind. The finished shape. The clean lines. The roof angled just right so rainwater would slide off into a collection barrel. A small, strong structure with open sides, benches inside, and a board on the front where notices could be pinned. Not a palace. A community corner. A place that would belong to everyone, even the people who laughed. Nida's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from her boss. "Extra shift tonight. Can you come?" Her stomach sank. She needed the money. But she also needed time. She stared at the message for a moment, then typed, "Yes, I'll come." She put the phone away and looked at her hands. Dust covered her palms. Small scratches marked her fingers. Her nails were broken. She didn't care. She cleaned up quickly, covered her work with a top, and went inside to shower. As the hot water hit her shoulders, she closed her eyes and tried to breathe. Every time she tried to do something new, life pulled her away. But she had learned something over the past year. If she waited for life to become easy, She would wait forever. So she kept building. Even when people laughed. That night, she came home late, exhausted. The street was quiet. Most houses were dark. She walked through her gate, and her eyes moved automatically to the top. It was still there. But something felt wrong. Nida stepped closer. The top had shifted. Her pulse quickened. She lifted it quickly and froze. One of the main support posts was loose. The screws she had placed were missing, scattered in the dirt like someone had dumped them. Someone had touched her work. Someone had tried to ruin it. Nida's chest tightened like a rope had wrapped around it. She knelt and picked up a screw, then another. Her hands trembled. It wasn't an accident. The screws hadn't fallen out on their own. She had tightened them hard. She looked around the yard. Everything else looked normal. No broken windows. No open gate. Just this. A quiet message. Stop. Nida stood up slowly, her eyes burning. For a moment, her mind filled with old tired thoughts. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is stupid. Maybe she should just keep her head down and survive. Then she remembered her mother's voice from years ago, warm and firm. If you build something good, some people will hate it. Not because it's wrong, but because they don't want to feel small beside it. Nida swallowed hard. She walked inside, locked the door, and sat at the kitchen table. The house was still. The clock ticked. Outside, a dog barked once, then went quiet. Nida stared at the wall for a long time. Then she got up, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small notebook. It was the notebook where she wrote plans, measurements, costs, materials she needed. She flipped to the last page and wrote one sentence. They touched it. So now I build smarter. The next morning, she woke early before work. The sky was still gray. She made tea, drank it quickly, and went outside. She did not fix the structure yet. Instead, she walked along the edges of her yard, scanning for anything unusual. Near the fence line, she saw footprints in the soft dirt. Fresh prints. Not hers. They led toward the back gate that opened to a narrow alley. Nida followed the prints slowly, her heart pounding. The alley was quiet. Garbage bins lined one side. The smell of damp paper and old food hung in the air. The footprints stopped near a broken section of fence where 2 wooden slats were missing. Someone had slipped through. Nida stared at the fence, then looked at the houses behind it. She could not see much, only rooftops and a few windows. But she felt something clear now. This wasn't just neighbors laughing. Someone was afraid of what she was building. And if someone was afraid, then it meant it mattered. Nida returned to her yard and stood in front of the half-built frame again. She could almost hear the voices from across the street already. There she goes again. What a joke. She took a deep breath. Then she began rebuilding the support post, this time using longer screws, stronger brackets, and hidden bolts that could not be removed easily. She worked quickly but carefully. By the time she left for work, the post stood solid again. Before she closed the front door, she turned back and looked at her project. It looked like a skeleton now, but to her, it looked like a challenge. That evening, as she returned home, she noticed something strange. A small white paper was taped to her gate. She pulled it off and unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, angry. Stop building. You don't belong here. Nida read it twice. Her throat went dry. She didn't belong here. She had lived here her entire life. She stared at the note, her mind racing. Who would write this? Imran? The loud neighbor who always made jokes? Or someone else, someone quieter, someone who smiled politely while hiding bitterness? Nida walked into her yard and looked around, suddenly aware that she was being watched from behind curtains. She folded the note and placed it in her pocket. Then she did something she had never done before. She walked across the street. Imran was outside again, leaning near his car, talking to another man. When he saw Nida approaching, his smile widened like he expected her to beg. Well, he said. Come to admit you need help. Nida stopped a few steps away. Did you touch my work? Imran's eyebrows lifted. What? My screws were removed, Nidar said. Someone tried to ruin it. Imran laughed, but it sounded forced. Why would I waste my time on your little mess? Nidar watched his face closely. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt. Annoyance. As if her question offended him because it suggested she had power. I don't care what you build, he said. Just don't make it ugly. Nidar nodded slowly. Good. Because I'm not stopping. She turned and walked back to her yard without waiting for his reply. Behind her, Imran muttered something to the other man. She couldn't hear it clearly, but she caught one word. Committee. Nidar paused near her gate. Committee. Her mind turned fast. The neighborhood committee. The group of people who decided what was acceptable. The group that loved rules when rules helped them control others. Nidar's grip tightened around the gate. So this was bigger than jokes. They were trying to block her officially. To stop her with papers and warnings and threats that looked polite from far away. But she wasn't far away anymore. That night, she returned to the hidden room in her closet and pulled out a folder she hadn't touched in years. Her mother's old documents. House ownership papers. Property boundaries. Permissions and old tax records. Nidar spread them on the table and studied them like her life depended on it. Because now, it did. If they tried to fight her, she needed to be ready. As she looked through the pages, one document slipped out and fell onto the floor. A yellowed paper, folded twice, with her mother's handwriting on the outside. Nidar froze. She had never seen this before. She unfolded it carefully. Inside, her mother had written a message, simple and direct. If you ever build something here, build it for the people who have no voice. And if the neighbors fight you, remember this, the land beside our home was meant for more. Nidar's eyes filled with tears. Meant for more. Her mother had planned something. Her mother had wanted this. Nidar wiped her face quickly, but her heart had changed shape. This wasn't only her project anymore. It was her mother's unfinished dream. And the people laughing across the street had no idea what was coming. Because Nidar wasn't building something small. She was building something that would force the whole neighborhood to see each other differently. The next morning, a notice appeared on her gate. Printed, official looking. Stop work order, pending review by neighborhood committee. Nidar stared at it, her blood turning cold. They had moved fast. She pulled the notice down, her hands shaking, and read the fine print. It wasn't from the city. It wasn't from any government office. It was from the neighborhood committee. A fake power trying to look real. Nidar's lips parted slightly. Then she smiled. A slow, determined smile. Because if they were using fake orders, it meant they didn't have real ones. And that meant she could still win. Nidar walked into her yard, picked up her drill, and began working again. Let them watch. Let them laugh. Let them try. She would finish what she started. And when it was done, they would understand why her mother wrote that note. The land beside their home was meant for more. And Nidar was about to prove it. The drill stopped mid-sound. Nidar stood still, staring at the stop work notice lying on the ground near her feet. The morning air felt heavier than usual, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. She bent down, picked up the paper, and read it again slowly. Stop work order, pending review by neighborhood committee. No stamp. No city seal. No signature from any official authority. Just words. Words meant to scare her. Nidar folded the paper carefully and placed it on the small table near the house. She did not tear it. She did not throw it away. She wanted them to see later that it never stopped her. Across the street, curtains moved. She could feel eyes on her now, not curious ones, but sharp and watchful. The laughter had faded. In its place was something colder. Control. Nidar picked up her drill again and went back to work. The sound echoed down the street, loud and steady. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up in front of her house. A white sedan. Clean. Expensive. A woman stepped out, dressed neatly, holding a clipboard like it was part of her arm. Her hair was tied back tight, and her expression was polite in a way that felt practiced. Nidar Hassan, the woman called. Nidar turned off the drill. Yes. I'm Farah, the woman said. I represent the neighborhood committee. Nida wiped her hands on her jeans. That paper you left isn't official. Farah smiled thinly. We prefer to resolve matters peacefully before involving authorities. Authorities who? Nida asked. Because this land is mine. Farah glanced at the structure. What you're building affects the character of the area. The area, Nida replied, has broken streetlights and no place for people to sit except their rooftops. Farah's smile tightened. That's not the point. Nida stepped closer. Then what is? Farah lowered her voice. You didn't ask permission. Nida felt a slow burn rise in her chest. I don't need permission to improve my own property. Farah sighed, like she was disappointed. You're young. You're emotional. You don't understand how things work here. That word landed hard. Emotional. Nida looked Farah directly in the eyes. You don't understand what this place needs. Farah straightened. If you continue, the committee will take action. What action? Nida asked calmly. Farah hesitated for half a second. It was enough. Exactly, Nida said. Farah closed her clipboard. Think carefully. People who don't cooperate often regret it. She walked back to her car without another word. As the car drove away, Nida noticed something she hadn't before. A small group had gathered farther down the street. Not laughing. Watching. One of them was an older man named Rashid who lived alone at the corner house. Another was a woman who ran a small tailoring shop from her living room. A teenage boy stood beside them, pretending to scroll on his phone while clearly paying attention. They didn't speak. But they didn't leave either. That night, Nida sat at her kitchen table, papers spread out again. Property records. Old approvals. Maps. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. They won't stop. Be careful. Nida stared at the screen. Another message came seconds later. Not everyone agrees with them. Her heart beat faster. She typed back. Who is this? There was a pause. Then a reply. Someone who uses what you're building. Someone who needs it. Nida's throat tightened. The next morning, she found a small box near her gate. Inside were metal brackets. Strong ones. Expensive. No note. She looked around but saw no one. Later that day, Rashid crossed the street slowly and stood near her fence. I heard they're bothering you, he said. Yes, Nida replied. He nodded once. They bothered your mother too. Nida froze. What? Rashid looked at the structure. She wanted a shared space. Years ago. A place for meetings. Help. Learning. Nida swallowed. Why didn't she build it? Rashid's eyes softened. Because she got sick. And because they told her she didn't belong. Something clicked into place inside Nida. This fear. This resistance. It wasn't new. They're afraid, Nida said quietly. Rashid nodded. Because if people gather, they talk. And when people talk, control slips. That evening, the committee sent a final warning. Printed again. Still unofficial. This time, Nida taped it to the front of the structure where everyone could see. Then she added a handwritten sign below it. Still building. Still allowed. People stopped walking. Some smiled. Some frowned. But they all read it. The next day, something changed. Children wandered closer. One sat on an unfinished bench. A woman asked what it would be when it was done. A place for everyone, Nida said. That afternoon, someone brought water. Someone else brought nails. By sunset, the laughter was gone. The neighborhood was choosing sides. And the committee knew it. That night, Nida stood alone in the yard, looking at what she had built so far. It was still unfinished. But it was already working. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Farah. Final notice. Meeting tomorrow morning. Attendance required. Nida read it once. Then she replied. I'll be there. And so will others. She put the phone away and looked up at the sky. Tomorrow, the fight would be public. And the whole neighborhood would finally see what she was really building. Morning came with a strange quiet. No drills. No laughter. No whispers. Nidar walked toward the community hall with steady steps, the folded documents tucked under her arm. She wore simple clothes, her hair tied back, her face calm in a way that surprised even her. Outside the hall, chairs were already set in rows. That had never happened before. The neighborhood committee usually met in small rooms, quietly, with no witnesses. But today, people were arriving in groups. Rashid came slowly, leaning on his cane. The tailor woman arrived with 2 others from her street. The teenage boy came with his younger sister. Even people who had laughed before now stood at a distance, unsure but curious. Farah stood near the entrance, stiff and alert. When she saw the crowd, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This meeting is for committee members only," she said loudly. Rashid spoke before Nidar could. "Then why did you post notices on every street?" Murmurs spread. Farah hesitated. "This is not a public discussion." Nidar stepped forward. "Then stop pretending it is." She walked inside without waiting for permission. People followed. The hall filled. For the first time in years, the committee sat facing the neighborhood instead of hiding from it. Farah cleared her throat. "We are here to address unauthorized construction." Nidar stood. "On my property." "It affects everyone," Farah replied. "Yes," Nidar said. "That's the point." A man from the committee leaned forward. "You didn't follow procedure." Nidar opened her folder and placed copies of documents on the table. Property ownership. Boundaries. No violations. No city restrictions. Farah glanced at them, her confidence slipping. "This structure," Nidar continued, "is open. No walls. No rent. No control." A woman in the audience spoke up. "My children have nowhere to sit after school." A man added, "We have meetings in cramped houses." Rashid lifted his cane slightly. "We have voices, but no place to use them." The room shifted. Farah stood quickly. "This is becoming emotional." Nidar looked at her. "No. This is becoming honest." She turned to the crowd. "My mother wanted this place. She was told she didn't belong. I was told the same. But look around. Who decides who belongs?" Silence. Then the tailor woman clapped once. Another followed. Then another. The sound grew, slow but strong. Farah's face drained of color. "This meeting is over," she said sharply. "No," Rashid replied. "It's just beginning." Later that afternoon, the committee's authority collapsed quietly. No shouting. No chaos. Just facts and witnesses and voices that refused to go silent again. By evening, the stop work notices were withdrawn. Not officially announced. Just gone. Nidar returned home as the sun lowered behind the rooftops. The structure stood waiting. This time, she was not alone. People arrived without being asked. Someone held wood steady. Someone passed tools. Someone painted a bench. Even Imran stood at a distance, watching, uncertain. Nidar caught his eye once. He looked away. By nightfall, the structure was finished. Clean lines. Strong posts. Benches that faced each other. A board at the front where notices could be pinned. A light hung from the center, glowing warm and steady. Children sat first. Then elders. Then everyone. The space filled with voices, not loud, but alive. Nidar stood back, her chest full. Rashid came to her side. "You didn't just build wood and nails." Nidar nodded. "I built what was missing." Rashid smiled. "Your mother would be proud." Later that night, after everyone left, Nidar sat alone on one of the benches. The neighborhood felt different now. Not perfect, but awake. Across the street, a window curtain moved. Someone watched. Not laughing. Learning. Nidar leaned back and looked at the structure one last time. They laughed at her construction. But what she built changed everything. Because once people have a place to stand together, no one can push them back into silence. And this place was never hers alone. It belonged to everyone. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. The structure stood quietly, doing what it was meant to do. Mornings brought elders who sat with tea and talked about the old days. Afternoons brought children who spread their books across the benches and helped each other with homework. Evenings brought soft discussions, shared ideas, and plans that once had nowhere to live. Nida watched it all from a small distance. She still worked long hours. She still came home tired. But the heaviness she once carried had shifted. It no longer pressed her down. It moved through her, lighter now, like air finding a way out of a closed room. One afternoon, a young woman approached her while she was fixing a loose hinge. "I didn't know one person could do this," the woman said. Nida smiled gently. "One person can start it. Others make it real." The neighborhood committee did not disappear, but it changed. Meetings became open. Decisions were discussed, not whispered. Farah stopped coming by. Someone else took her place. Someone quieter. Someone who listened. Even Imran changed. One evening, he stood near the benches, hands in his pockets. "I was wrong," he said without looking at Nida. She nodded once. "You don't have to explain." He hesitated. "Can I help paint next week?" Nida handed him a brush. "You already are." As the months passed, the structure became a symbol. Not of victory. Of possibility. When someone asked Nida why she kept going, she told them the truth. Because silence helped no one. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, Nida placed a small plant near the front post. A simple green leaf reaching upward. Rashid stood beside her. She would have liked this. Nida touched the wood, warm from the sun. She's part of it. That night, lights glowed softly under the roof. Laughter returned, but it was different now. It didn't cut. It connected. Nida sat on the bench and looked around. No one was watching from behind curtains anymore. They were all here. What she built didn't just change the neighborhood. It reminded people that belonging is not given. It is built.